All right. Why are you so indecisive? Now, this is something that I have struggled with in my life. So I have really looked into this and I've also worked with a ton of people on this issue. And I have found that there are some significant differences in terms of why we're indecisive or even what we're indecisive about. But then there's also some common elements. So I've actually come up with a bit of a decision tree to figure out why you in particular are indecisive and therefore what can you do about it? So, the first question I'd like you to ask yourself is, are you truly indecisive? And if you're watching this video, you'll probably say either yes or I'm not sure. So let's start with yes. If you know that you are generally an indecisive person, you've kind of labeled yourself that way, you frequently struggle with making decisions, you really dislike making decisions, and you hold yourself back because you don't make decisions, okay? So you have a clear yes. If you have the clear yes, I'd like to ask you, what is it you have a hard time making decisions about? Now, you might fall into the category of everything. You may be aware that you have a hard time making big decisions, but you also have a hard time making little decisions, what to eat, what to wear, what movie to watch. The other option would be that you have a hard time making decisions about major things, and they may fall into one particular area or another. You may always have a hard time making decisions about relationships or about work or career or financial, or there may just be like one or two particular areas, or it just may be major decisions. So if you're watching this video, but you're not fully convinced you truly deserve the label of personality-wise, I'm indecisive, then I think the issue could fall into a situation where you are being pressured to make a decision you're not ready to make. So maybe somebody else is calling you indecisive, but you don't really see yourself as indecisive, but somebody else wants you to make a decision. You're not ready to make it, or maybe you just take a little more time than your partner or your friend or your family members to make decisions, and you don't quite see it as indecisive, but you are feeling pressure around it. All right. And then the last category would fall under the I'm not sure if I'm always indecisive, but I'm really having a hard time making a decision about this one major issue in my life right now. So I'm going through a period of indecision at this moment. All right, I'm going to take each one of these and sort of break it down a little bit. And I do think that the suggestions for each one of these will be helpful for you no matter what category you're in. Okay, so if you have a hard time making decisions about everything, I'd say it's probably likely that you have a lot of overthinking, you have a very active mind, your mind might get obsessive. This kind of indecisiveness could actually be linked to obsessive compulsive disorder or ADHD. People with ADHD can have a hard time making decisions. People with generalized anxiety disorder. So there might be a larger issue behind your having trouble making decisions. And the other area where I see people really struggling with decisions about everything are people who grew up parentified or with more of a focus on what other people want and other people need than what they themselves want or need. So if you have trouble making decisions about everything, including those more minor issues in your life, I'd like you to come up with a list, okay? What I wear, what restaurant we go to, what movie we watch, the small decisions, okay? Come up with a list of those. Assess the importance of these different areas and choosing those where really it's not all that important. Like maybe the worst thing that happens if you don't dress appropriately is that you're uncomfortable for a little while. Okay, so what, right? You can handle that. So pick a few areas where the outcome really is not major and practice making quick decisions. Okay, I'm going to set the timer on my phone and for 5 minutes, I'm going to make the decision and I'm just going to do it and practice it. Practice it over and over with those small items because you will get better at it. It will be a matter of sort of pattern interrupt the overthinking. Now, if you fall into that category of somebody who was parentified or really focused on other people's needs and wants, This will be a practice of figuring out who am I? What do I want? What do I prefer? Right? But see it as an exercise and not like each decision is an end game, because it's not. So that would be a very practical tool if you have trouble making decisions on those smaller items. And if this does come from one of those bigger issues, then simultaneously beginning to work on the bigger issue of anxiety, OCD, ADD, parentification, all of that stuff. Working on that will eventually help with the decision making as well. But make sure you're working in the practice of making quicker decisions. Okay. Now, if you fall into the category that I fall into, which is frequently having trouble making decisions about major things in life, but kind of like I know that I overthink things sometimes, I know that I can get stuck in indecision about which direction I'd like things to go in kind of some of those major areas. So if this is also you, then I think it's important for us to recognize that we are often trying to come up with like a perfect solution. And we sort of think that somehow we'll be able to control an outcome that we actually can't control. Or that rather than looking for sort of what's the optimal decision given the information I have today, we can get stuck in analysis paralysis. We can get stuck in researching things over and over. And all of it is some attempt to ensure a perfect outcome, which is impossible. So now I'm going to move to those people who are not sure that they're really indecisive, but they're being told they're indecisive, or they're feeling pressure to make a decision they're not ready to make. Now, if this is you, this is an issue of boundaries. It's an issue of self-confidence. If you're not ready to make a decision, it's okay. You're not ready to make the decision, right? So if somebody is pressuring you to commit more strongly to a relationship or to decide right now on moving somewhere and you don't feel like you know enough or you haven't really done the kind of research that would be reasonable and sensible to do, then it's really important to look through why are you allowing yourself to be pressured. So this becomes really a boundary issue, right? Can I stand in my own truth and acknowledge I'm not actually indecisive? I'm just not ready to make a decision. Now, I'm going to bring up something which is a little bit silly here, but my husband's a very fast decision maker. Really, he can, boom, make decisions. I don't. I take a little bit more time. Even when I'm not stuck in indecisiveness, I tend to like to do my research. So let's say it's around travel, right? I definitely like to research the hotels I'll stay in. I will look at reviews. I'll put the word noisy in, the search bar for the reviews, see if people are complaining the hotel is noisy, because I'm very sensitive to noise at nighttime. And I like to do a little bit more research about where I'm going to be staying. He doesn't. He could sleep anywhere. He's just not that picky. It doesn't matter to him. But that doesn't mean in that situation that I'm indecisive. It just means I have a different decision-making process. And I do like to do research. And that for me is sort of research that's fun to do. And I generally don't get stuck doing it over and over for a really long time. So I'm comfortable with the amount of time I will take to make a decision in that kind of area. So I'm hoping that this is helping you see that people make decisions differently, right? And if you are with a partner who makes much quicker decisions than you do, you don't have to feel bad about your approach to decision making. And obviously, if it's a major topic, you might need to take your time. So the work for you will be to really look into what fear comes up for you around letting others know you're not ready to make a decision on this. Okay? All right. And then our last category of people where you're not sure you're always indecisive, but you've been going around and around and around on a major decision, probably for longer than you would want, and you'd like to figure out how to cut that short. Okay? So if you're in that category, I think it's important to recognize that we have a hard time making decisions among suboptimal choices. Many, many, many choices that we are faced with in life are suboptimal. If there is a clearly optimized choice, most of us don't have trouble making it, right? If I want to switch careers and I'm offered a job at a much higher salary in a city I love and it's in the field I want to go into, there's no problem making that decision. It's an optimal choice. But let's say I want to switch careers and I get a job offer and it really is paying a little bit less than my current job. It's in a location I'm not really so certain about, but it's the kind of work I want to do. Well, that's a much harder choice, right? But it's suboptimal. It's in an area I don't really want to be in. It's paying a little bit less, but it is the work I want to do. So that would be the choice in that direction, or stay where I am, earn a little bit more, and live where I want. So the pros and cons kind of even out. And that's really where we have trouble making decisions. And unfortunately, most of our decisions, most of them, are suboptimal. So no matter what category you're in, let's talk about some tools that help you break through indecisiveness. All right. Number one, write out that pro and con list, knowing, right? Knowing that the choices are suboptimal. One is not clearly the best choice. Okay, so that's your step number one. Step number two is to look at what are the values conflicts. Actually, in the online 6-month program that I have, I really begin it by having people go through what are their most important values. Because when we're clear on our values and really what our priorities are, it's easier to make decisions. It's easier to know what direction we want to go in, right? But again, where we get stuck having trouble making decisions is usually around a value conflict. So let me go back to that example I used of the job in a different location, but the field you want, but lower pay. The values, right? So you might value earning a certain amount of money, right? You might value stability through income. So that would be a value that would guide you to stay where you are. But you also might value having work you love. I mean, we spend a lot of time at work. It's very hard not to have work you love. So, what is that worth to you? So, most areas where we have trouble making decisions, there's a values conflict. So, second step is looking at that pro and con list. Label what values are represented for each item you wrote down, right? Higher salary. Okay, what's the value for you? And then look at which are my most important values. If I value family above everything and staying where I am means I can stay close to family, awesome. If I value adventure more than anything and there's a job where I can travel, right? So look at that pro and con list, write in what the values are, and begin to think through the priorities in terms of your values. Step number 3, ask yourself, how much time does this decision deserve? Right? So if it's a decision about what am I going to wear to the party coming up, to me, that does not deserve a huge amount of time. For me, that would be, turn the clock to 5 minutes, make your decision, right? But you can decide. Is it worth 30 minutes to you? Is it worth an hour? Is it worth 5 days, right? Just decide how much time is it worth to make this decision. Now, if this is a decision about a major life change, moving, switching jobs, getting married, getting divorced, right? Those kind of decisions deserve a lot of time and a lot of thought. But no matter what, you can sort of put a time frame down for yourself. Having a deadline is super helpful for making decisions. And then once you've set that time frame, particularly if this is for a big decision, then write out what some steps are that you can take in the near term to get yourself closer. For example, is this something that needs to be brainstormed with somebody? Might you benefit from talking about this with a therapist? Let's say if it's a big relationship conflict issue, would getting an outside opinion help? Or is there more research that you need to do? What might be some steps to get you closer to decision making? Now, this step number 4 is tricky for those of us who get into analysis paralysis. So if you know that's you, maybe pull back here. If is no more research you need to do, or you know that your drive to do more research is based in fear, which we're going to get to in a second, or based in a feeling of wanting to control the uncontrollable, which we'll get to, then you really need to come back to that. When does this decision need to be made? Okay, so I just want to put that caveat in there about step number 4. But if there really is not much else you need to do, you've done the research you can. There's a lot of uncertainties, right? That's the other thing about those areas where we really have trouble making decisions is there's uncertainty. So if you've done the work, still can't get yourself to the point of making a decision, step number 5 is to journal on the role of anxiety and fear in this decision. What are you afraid of? It's probably you're afraid of making the wrong decision, right? So just spend a moment writing out your fears, writing out your anxieties. Begin to acknowledge that you're trying to control an outcome that's not controllable. In this area, I'd also like to suggest that you really contemplate the fact that there is no right decision. There's not. Like you might say to me, oh, no, 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 there's a right decision because if it turns out right, then I'll be happy and XYZ will happen and X and ABC won't happen. And, but that's actually not true. All we can do is make the best decision we can in the moment given the information that we have. And probably whatever decision you make, some good things will come out of it and some not so good things will come out of it. Sorry to say, but that's really how life works, right? We choose this path instead of that path, and there's some wonderful things on that path, and then there's some unexpected problems, but there might be some unexpected joys. And you can just know, had you chosen that other path, would have been the same. So acknowledging that there's no right answer. There's no perfect answer. There's no perfect outcome of your decision. There's not. I think that's probably the most important thing here. So the last step is make the decision. Just make whatever decision it is. Take into account the timing that you just wrote out. Take into account any other steps you need to do, right? Because if you still have some steps to do, it's not the right time to make the decision. The right thing to do right now is simply to do those steps. But if I've done most of the steps, the time is now, and you make the decision. Now, I'm going to share with you a little trick that I do on myself that might seem like I'm not really making a decision, but I am. So, one thing that I will do is I will try to integrate all the information, how I'm feeling about it, process it. I might then decide to ignore it for a little bit and go take a walk or do something completely different, put it out of my mind. And somehow the information tends to sort of germinate and grow, and a decision becomes clearer. And I will often make a decision. I will speak that decision either to myself or to somebody else, but say, I want to sleep on it. So for big decisions, I will come to my conclusion, but then I'll want to sleep on it. And the next morning, I'm like, okay, how does that decision feel? And if I wake up and I'm like, yeah, ooh, no, that really doesn't feel right. I really don't want to do that. Okay, then it's clear, right? Or if I wake up and I'm like, yeah, yeah, that's the decision. So we each sort of have different rhythms, right? So I tend to think the most clearly in the morning. I do think that sleeping helps me sort of process information. So that's a technique that works for me. I've also, I have to say, I will admit, there have been times where I've flipped a coin. Like I really can't decide, but I need to make the decision fast. I'll flip a coin. And let's say option A is heads and option B is tails, and I come up with heads. And then I look at it and my stomach goes, no, I didn't want that. Well, that's my information. So I'll flip the coin, but I'll check out how is my body feeling about this, because our best decisions really integrate the analysis that some of us, if we have overactive brains, are a little too good at, but integrating it with our feelings and our gut and just sometimes a much more intuitive sense of the right thing to do. And if the underlying issues underneath the problem making decisions really ties to that concept of a negative core belief, right? Like I've worked with that a lot, those of you who know me, right? So if I can't make a decision because I don't trust myself, or if I have some really negative self-talk of like, oh, I always make the wrong decision, or I always choose the wrong thing, or things never work out for me, those are cognitive distortions. And you can check out my video on cognitive distortions and also the one on catastrophizing, right? That if you feel like, oh, if I always make the wrong decision, then blah, 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 all this horrible stuff is going to happen. So be aware of your thought patterns that are getting in the way of making decisions. And if this is tied to some negative belief about yourself or the world, like the world's not safe, or I'm stupid, or I'm incompetent, it's important to work on those negative core beliefs, right? And I do have that PDF. If you haven't downloaded it, it's free. It's called Transform Your Negative Core Beliefs. It walks you through how do you identify the negative core belief and then 3 methods of transforming that negative core belief into a more reasonable, positive belief. And the link for that PDF is in the description to this video. So I hope this was helpful for you. Let me know, and I'll see you next week.